Welcome to the Rulebook Tavern Chronicles, where we are talking about role-playing games. Today, we will be taking a deep dive into the monk class in Pathfinder 2e.
Ooh, the monk.
For those unfamiliar,
Yeah.
monks are all about harnessing this mystical energy called ki
Right.
to fuel their incredible martial arts prowess.
It's awesome.
They're the masters of unarmed combat, pulling off moves that would make Bruce Lee jealous. But there's more to them than just punches and kicks. They're incredibly versatile.
Yeah, what's fascinating about monks is that they can fill a variety of roles in a party.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they can be a frontline damage dealer, a nimble skirmisher controlling the battlefield, with deft maneuvers, or even a support character with their ki powers.
Okay.
Imagine you could have a monk that not only lays down the hurt,
Wow.
but also heals their allies in a pinch.
Okay. I'm already seeing how their ki energy adds a whole other dimension to the class.
Right.
But before we get lost in all the cool ki stuff,
Yeah.
let's talk about the basic strengths and weaknesses of the monk. What are the core pros and cons that someone should consider before diving into this class?
Well, one of the monk's biggest strengths is their incredible mobility.
Okay.
They have this action called step that lets them move with a fluidity most other classes can only dream of. This makes them incredibly hard to pin down in combat, and they can use this to their advantage to flank enemies, avoid attacks of opportunity, or even reposition themselves for a tactical strike.
So we're talking about a class that can dictate the flow of battle, not just react to it.
Yeah.
That's pretty powerful. And then there's the iconic stunning fist, right?
Yes.
I mean, who doesn't love the idea of landing a punch that can temporarily disable an opponent?
Absolutely. Stunning Fist is a classic monk move, and for good reason. It can completely turn the tide of battle by taking a dangerous enemy out of the fight, even if it's just for a short time.
Right.
But there's a trade-off.
Oh.
This move and many others relies on those Kai points, so managing that resource effectively is key to playing a monk well.
It's like they have this internal energy reserve that they have to carefully balance
Yes.
between powerful attacks and strategic movement.
Yeah.
Makes you think twice about just spamming your coolest moves.
Exactly. And that's where the different stances come into play.
Okay.
Think of them as focusing your kin in different ways. For instance, you might go into Ironblood stance to bolster your defenses if you're expecting a big attack,
Right.
or switch to Cobra stance to unleash a series of venomous strikes.
Ooh, cool.
But each stance affects your key point usage, so you're constantly making tactical decisions based on your resources.
Okay, so monks have a high skill ceiling.
Yeah.
You can't just button mash your way to victory.
No.
But every class has its downsides.
Sure.
What are some of the challenges a monk player might face?
Well, unlike a heavily armored fighter, monks typically rely on speed and Kai-powered defenses rather than bulky armor.
Oh,
This can make them a bit more vulnerable to powerful attacks, especially if they get caught out of position.
so it sounds like playing a monk effectively requires a different mindset. You can't just stand toe-to-toe and slug it out. You have to be smart about picking your battles, utilizing your mobility to your advantage, and mastering the art of hit-and-run tactics. It's a class for those who prefer a more dynamic and strategic approach to combat.
That's a great way to put it. Now, if you're considering playing a monk, you might be wondering about the best ancestries to choose from.
Okay.
Sticking to the core rulebook, two strong contenders are humans and elves.
The good old human, always a solid choice.
Yeah.
What makes them such a good fit for the monk?
Humans get an extra feat at first level, and for a class that relies so heavily on feats to define its capabilities,
Right.
that early advantage is huge.
Yeah.
You could use that extra feat to shore up your defenses with something like toughness for extra hit points, or grab another combat feat to really enhance your martial prowess. It's a fantastic head start.
An extra feat right out of the gate is definitely tempting.
Uh-huh.
But what about elves?
Yeah.
What makes them a good match for a monk?
Elves naturally have an agility that complements a monk's fighting style perfectly.
Right.
They're already graceful and quick, which makes them even more formidable in close combat.
And don't forget about their low light vision.
Yes.
That could be super helpful for navigating those dimly lit dungeons you inevitably find yourself in.
Right. Those little racial treats can often make a big difference in the long run. But ancestry is only one part of creating a character.
Right.
You also want to think about their background, which fleshes out their story and gives them some starting skills and abilities.
Absolutely. A well-chosen background can add so much depth and flavor to a character.
Totally.
So what are some backgrounds that would resonate well with a monk?
Two options that highlight the diversity of the monk's background are criminal and acolyte.
A criminal monk.
Yeah.
Now that's an interesting concept.
Right.
I'm imagining someone who honed their skills on the streets, maybe even turning their life around to use their abilities for good.
And mechanically, the criminal background's dexterity boost is perfect for a monk. Plus, skills like stealth and thievery really fit the nimble, agile nature of the class.
It's like they're a shadow striking from the darkness.
Uh-huh.
I love it. What about the acolyte background?
Mm.
I'm picturing a monk trained in a secluded temple or monastery,
Yeah,
mastering ancient martial traditions passed down through generations.
precisely. The acolyte background suggests a strong spiritual foundation, and that wisdom boost they get will directly enhance their key powers, making them even more potent.
Plus, who wouldn't want a monk with some knowledge of religion?
Yeah.
That could lead to some fascinating role-playing opportunities. Maybe even insights into lost fighting styles or forgotten martial arts.
You're absolutely right. Backgrounds are much more than just flavor text.
Yes.
They provide tangible benefits that can shape your character's journey. Now, let's talk about spells, or rather, the lack thereof.
Ah, yes, the age-old question.
Yeah.
Do monks cast spells? They don't have spell books or anything like that,
Yeah.
but they do have access to some unique abilities.
Exactly. Monks don't cast spells in the traditional sense like a wizard or cleric.
Okay.
Instead, they have access to key spells.
Okay.
Think of them as special techniques fueled by their key points rather than spell slots.
So instead of memorizing spells from a book,
Yeah.
monks learn these key spells through rigorous training and discipline, further emphasizing their mastery of body and mind.
That's a great way to think about it. And these key spells offer a variety of tactical options that really showcase the monk's versatility.
Okay.
Want to terrify your enemies?
Yeah.
Horrific visage will do the trick.
Ooh.
Need to move with incredible speed.
Yeah.
Face step lets you teleport across the battlefield.
Wow, so key spells really add a whole other layer of strategy to the monk class.
Right.
It's not just about hitting hard and fast. It's about using your key wisely to control the fight and outsmart your opponents.
You're getting it. And I think that's a perfect place to pause for now. We've covered a lot of ground from the basics of the monk class to the intricacies of key spells and stances. But there's still so much more to explore.
I bet you, the listener, are already picturing your own unique monk character, imagining those lightning-fast strikes and the mystical power of ki flowing through them.
We'll be back soon to dive even deeper into the world of the monk, so stay tuned for more insights and tactical tips. Welcome back. Before the break, we were discussing those fascinating ki spells, which really set the monk apart from other martial classes.
Right. Those key spells are super cool, but I think it's important to remember that. Unlike a wizard, monks don't have a giant spell book to choose from. They learn a smaller number of these key spells, each with very specific uses.
That's a great point. It emphasizes how important it is to choose key spells that actually fit the role your monk is going to play in the party. Are you building a damage dealer, someone who supports their allies, or a character focused on controlling the flow of battle? Your choice of key spells should reflect that.
It's like they have this carefully curated arsenal of techniques, each one honed to perfection through years of dedicated practice.
That's a perfect analogy. It speaks to the monk's philosophy of mastering a smaller set of abilities, rather than dabbling in everything.
So for you, the listener, as you're building your monk, think about how your key spells will work together with your chosen feats and stances to make a truly powerful and unique character.
Now let's get into some specific examples of key spells and how they might be used in combat.
Let's hear it. Which ones are your favorites?
One that always catches my eye is Bark Skin.
Okay.
It's a fantastic defensive option because it lets the monk temporarily increase their armor class. Since monks usually don't wear heavy armor, this extra protection can be a lifesaver, especially when facing enemies that hit hard.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It lets the monk stay agile while also giving them some extra toughness when they need it most. What other key spells do you find particularly useful?
Stunning Fist is, of course, the classic monk move. As we discussed earlier, it's incredibly potent because it can temporarily disable an enemy, giving your whole party a chance to capitalize on that opening. But it's important to remember that it uses a chunk of your key points.
Yeah.
So using Stunning Fist effectively is all about timing and making sure it counts.
You don't want to waste it on a minor enemy and then be left defenseless when the big bad shows up.
Exactly. Managing those key points is a constant balancing act.
Speaking of balance,
Yeah.
I think it's important to highlight that monks are more than just brawlers. They're incredibly skilled fighters who rely on precision, technique, and knowing when to strike.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They have a deep understanding of unarmed combat, and they can use a variety of combat maneuvers to outwit their opponents. And of course, there's the famous flurry of blows, which lets them unleash a series of rapid attacks that can overwhelm even the toughest enemies.
Ah, yes. Flurry of blows, the hallmark of the monk's fighting style. It's like watching a whirlwind of punches and kicks. But let's not forget that they can also use weapons.
Right. Even though they're known for their unarmed combat, monks are also proficient with certain weapons like daggers, short swords, and even staves. This opens up a whole range of options for building your monk.
Okay.
You could create a character who specializes in a particular weapon, or someone who seamlessly blends weapon attacks with their martial arts.
So much variety. But I think it's time we address the elephant in the room. Key points. Expert speaker, we've touched on this throughout the episode, but can you break it down for our listeners who are new to the monk?
Of course. Key points are the fuel that powers all of the monk's special abilities, including those cool key spells, the stances, and even some of their combat maneuvers. If you want to play a monk effectively, you have to learn how to manage your key points carefully.
It's like a strategic resource, right? You can't just spend it all willy-nilly. You have to be mindful of how you use it, making sure you have enough left to activate your most powerful abilities at the right moment.
That's a perfect way to describe it. You don't want to be in the middle of a tough fight and suddenly realize you have no key points left to activate Stunning Fist or enter a defensive stance.
So, listeners, keep an eye on that key point pool. Don't be afraid to conserve your energy, sometimes waiting for the perfect moment to unleash your most devastating techniques.
Now let's switch gears and talk about combat strategy. How do you actually play a monk effectively in a fight?
Okay, I'm all ears. Give me some tactical tips.
One of the most important things to remember is to use your mobility to your advantage. We talked about the step action earlier. Well, that incredible speed and agility gives you a huge edge when it comes to positioning and maneuvering on the battlefield.
It's like they're playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. They're always one step ahead, thinking about their next move.
Exactly. Monks are masters of hit-and-run tactics. They dart in and out of combat, flanking enemies and avoiding getting bogged down in prolonged fights. They control the flow of battle by dictating the terms of engagement.
So for you, the listener, don't just stand there and trade blows. Use your movement. Step around your opponents, flank them, and keep them guessing. Make them work for every hit.
Another key strategy is to use your key abilities wisely. Each Kai spell and stance has a specific purpose, so think about how you can use them strategically to have the biggest impact.
It's about choosing the right tool for the right job.
Absolutely. For example, let's say you're facing a group of enemies.
Okay.
Using a key spell like Footprints of the Wind to create difficult terrain
Right.
could really hinder their movement, giving you and your allies a tactical advantage.
That's a great example. It shows how key spells aren't just about attacking or defending. They can also be used to control the battlefield and manipulate the situation to your favor.
And don't forget about your stances.
Right.
Each stance has unique benefits and drawbacks, so choosing the right stance for the current situation is vital.
Right.
For instance, if you're facing a powerful enemy who hits like a truck, adopting a defensive stance, like Iron Blood stance, could drastically reduce the amount of damage you take.
It's like there's this whole mini game happening within the bigger fight, where you're constantly assessing the situation, analyzing your opponent, and switching stances to adapt to the ever-changing flow of combat.
That's a great way to put it. Mastering the art of stance selection is a crucial part of playing a monk effectively.
Man, there's so much depth to this class.
There is.
But unfortunately, we're nearing the end of our deep dive into the monk.
We've covered a lot, but there's always more to learn and explore. I encourage you, the listener, to experiment with different builds, try out different key spells and stances, and discover your own unique way of playing a monk.
That's what's so great about role-playing games. It's all about being creative, trying new things, and finding what works for you. There's no one right way to play a monk.
And with that, we'll conclude our deep dive into the monk class. I hope this episode has given you a better understanding of this fascinating and dynamic class, and maybe even inspired you to try playing one yourself.
But before we go, I think we should leave our listeners with one final thought. We've talked about the power of key, the importance of stances, and the strategic use of key spells. But what truly sets the monk apart is their unwavering discipline, their dedication to self-improvement, and their constant pursuit of mastery over both their body and mind.
That's a beautiful way to sum it up. It's that inner spirit that truly makes the monk such a compelling class.
We're back for the final round of our monk deep dive. And I have to say, I'm feeling pretty pumped after that last point. It's that inner drive, that dedication to pushing your limits that really makes the monk more than just another fighting class.
You hit the nail on the head. It's about constantly striving for self-improvement, both physically and mentally. And luckily, the monk's progression path reflects that with tons of feats and abilities that allow you to really customize your character's growth as they gain experience.
Okay, let's talk feats. What are some must-have feats for any aspiring monk, no matter what kind of build they're going for?
One that stands out, even though it might seem basic at first glance, is toughness. Those extra hit points it grants can be the difference between staying in the fight and going down early, which is crucial for a class that often relies on lighter armor.
Survival is key, especially when you're all about speed and agility rather than hiding behind a shield. So what other feats would you recommend grabbing in those early levels?
Crane stance is a fantastic choice, especially for newer players.
Okay.
It's a defensive stance that allows you to deflect blows with grace and precision. It embodies that core monk philosophy of turning your opponent's strength against them.
I love that imagery. And speaking of imagery, crane style is just one of many visually stunning stances that monks can adopt.
Absolutely. Each stance not only has mechanical benefits, but also adds a layer of flavor and cinematic flair to your character. Imagine your monk seamlessly flowing from mountain stance, where they're an unmovable object, to dancing dragon stance, where they become a whirlwind of unpredictable strikes.
It sounds incredible. But as much as I love the visual aspects, let's get back to those practical feat choices. What about monks who want to dish out some serious damage?
If you're going for a high damage build, you can't go wrong with Flurry of Blows. It's that iconic ability that lets you unleash a rapid series of attacks, overwhelming your opponent with sheer speed and power.
It's like the bread and butter of a monk's offensive capabilities.
Yeah.
But we have to remind everyone it does cost key points to use, so don't go spamming it in every fight.
Right, resource management is key. And a feat that synergizes really well with Flurry of Blows is, of course, Stunning Fist. Imagine landing a Stunning Fist and then following up with a Flurry of Blows while your opponent is reeling.
Oh, wow.
It's a devastating combination.
Talk about a 1-2 punch.
Yeah.
But again, we have to emphasize that key points are a precious resource. You can't just use your coolest moves all the time. So what are some tips for making the most out of your key point pool?
One important thing is to prioritize abilities that offer the most bang for your buck, so to speak. Using Stunning Fist to disable a dangerous enemy could be worth spending a lot of key points. But using a key spell for a minor effect might not be as efficient.
It's about making smart choices based on the situation, weighing your options and figuring out the best way to use your key to turn the tide of battle.
Exactly. Another tip is to remember that monks are skilled martial artists even without using ki. Don't be afraid to rely on your basic attacks and combat maneuvers when you need to conserve ki.
Sometimes the simplest approach is the most effective, and those basic attacks still hit hard, especially with a monk's impressive attack speed.
Right. And as you gain experience playing a monk, you'll naturally get better at managing your key points and integrating those abilities into your overall combat strategy.
It's a learning process, both for the character and the player. But sadly, we've reached the end of our monk deep dive. We've explored a lot, from the fundamentals of the class to advanced tactics, and those game-changing feats. But before we wrap up, let's leave our listeners with some parting wisdom.
As you create your monk, remember to embrace the versatility of the class. Experiment with different builds, explore the vast array of stances and craze spells, and find what truly speaks to your personal playstyle. There's no one right way to play a monk.
And never forget, the true power of the monk doesn't just come from their physical abilities. It comes from their unwavering discipline, their focused mind, and their dedication to mastering both their body and spirit.
It's that inner strength that sets the monk apart. So go forth, embrace the path of the monk, and unleash your full potential.
Hope you enjoyed this deep dive with us, and see you soon to talk about other classes.